Christina Digital Tutorials. Today we're going to talk about how to set up your workspace to make it more efficient. And when you first open Photoshop, this is what it's going to look like. And if you notice when you're watching in my tutorials, you're going to see that I have a whole lot more on there. And I set my panel up with the tools that I use the most. And let me show you how to do that. We're going to create a customized workspace, make it custom for you. And then I'm going to show you how to save it. So the first thing you can notice is if you come over to the top right and you click, there's quite a few options here. And before I click on one of those, I want to show you, if you go into the magic wand tool, which is right here, you're going to see that you have these three options. Now watch what happens when I change from the essentials to the core. Things moved around over here, and if I click on this, now I only have two options. And that other option has been brought down into a different section, and it will change based on what you choose. I do think that you should stick with the essentials as your base. That's going to have most of the stuff that you watch in tutorials on the left, and they're going to be in the same place. But let's look at our panel sections on the right. So they've got the color swatches up here to make it easy for you to pick. I don't personally use that because I typically will come over to the left here and I will click and I get the swatch area over here. If you click the tabs, you're going to see different swatches. If you have branding colors or you have particular colors that you really like to use all the time, you can create custom swatches in this by just clicking the plus sign when you have the color on the left chosen. I would recommend, if you're going to do that, the first thing you do is create a folder and name it my favorite colors or whatever you want, but then you can begin to add some of your favorite colors in there. I don't use it a whole lot. I did when I had my photography business because I had my brand colors in there and it made it very easy. Gradients. Again, I don't use this panel a whole lot because I'm typically over in my paint bucket, and if I go into my paint bucket, I'm going to use this area to get to my swatches because it pops up, it's convenient to get to. Your last panel here is patterns, and you're going to see it. I have a couple of patterns in here. I'll do a future video on how to create custom patterns because you're going to find that's going to help you when you're working in your images. But they do come with some standards, and even though you think I would never use one of these patterns, they are usually really great when you use your layer panel and you change it to like luminosity or color, and it can create some nice textures when you wouldn't think that it would, especially the grass one. This here I find really common that I use a lot, but this isn't something we use a whole lot, so we could get rid of this whole section if we wanted to. If we click in the little gray area, we can drag it out and you can see now that it's floating. If I wanted to close the color panel, I can even pull that tab out and I can close it, and I can keep going until I get rid of the ones that I'm not really going to use. And I can put this back up here where it was, or I could even drag it into this section and it'll just become a little pop-up. If I wanted to see these instead of having them be pop-ups, I would just hit this little arrow here, and now you can see my panel has expanded and I can see these options all the time. I can change the size, so if I've got a history here and I'm looking at my history and I have a ton in there, I could drag it down temporarily or permanently based on my needs. If you don't have your layers panel, which you would if you start from the basic essentials, this is a panel that I use a lot, so I'm definitely going to leave that on here. And the channel and paths, they go together, so I typically leave those in there. So the properties, this will change based on the tool that you're using. So right now I have a fill layer and it has no mask, but if I were to delete this fill layer and I were to add text over here, and we'll just put the standard text that's there, you can see that my properties panel has changed. If I were to do a generative fill, that is where my options are going to be. So like if I come over here and I maybe change his paw, it's going to change over to the generative fill properties. So this panel is really important, and I do keep this up. On a side note, if you were to change, because you have a ton of layers that you're working with, and you move it up and you go, where are my options for my generative fill? Well, you've just hidden them like I did. So you'll want to come up here and make this bigger so that you can see your options. The adjustments layer, this is the same as what's down here, so I don't typically use that. I could delete it, but I leave it there. The libraries, this is going to be something that's very advanced. You don't need that, but you could leave it there in case you get to it later. Your history is important to have in here. You have your actions. I typically like these separated, so I will drag my actions down and I will keep going until I find a blue line like that. Well, see, now I did the wrong blue line and it added it into that section, and I wanted it to have its own section. I'm going to do another tutorial and I'm going to talk about actions and how they can speed up your work, but you definitely are going to want this as you get used to using actions. Now, what about some of the panels that are missing? Well, if you go over to Windows, I would encourage you to click on these and find which ones you use more often. Like, I really use this character one a lot. And so I keep this on here. And why would I keep that on there when it pops up into properties when I'm on a text layer? And I'll show you. So if I go back to my T to get into my text, then you can see that these panels offer different options. So I've got what we call a faux bold here and a faux italic, and I can do these things. If I were to put a faux bold on, whenever I'm warping text, it's going to tell me that it might not like that and I have to take it off. But just know that the properties panel is not going to always have the same thing for the character. And you have your paragraph that comes with character. I do leave it there, but that allows me to kind of adjust things. I don't use it a whole lot with what we're doing with our AI generative fill in our designs, but if I were doing big copy or something, I would use this panel more. So there are other ones in here that you may use. You probably, let's see here, paths, probably not so much, but maybe. But you can kind of come down and play with them and see which ones you would like to use. This is also where you can turn off the contextual pop-up that you keep getting. So if this drives you crazy and you don't like it because you're using the options in the other places, then you can turn that off by window and unchecking contextual text bar. So let's say that we have our panel set up the way we like. Then what I would do is I would go back up into this little feature in the top right, and I would click it, and it's not letting me click, probably because I'm inside my text. So I have to get out of my text. And then I can come down here and I can say new workspace, and I can save this for the setup that I've created. So we'll call this the tutorial setup. And now if my computer crashes or anything, I have saved this. I will tell you that if you don't save or close Photoshop, then when you open it back up, it's going to open back up with whatever you had opened it with before. So if you're like me and you like to keep it open, then I would just do a quick close and restart. The same goes true, by the way, when you create actions or do other changes. When you close is when it saves. So you always kind of want to think about that when you've taken the time to set everything up. I personally use a combination on the right here, and I will keep the things that I'm used the most often open, and then I will come up and let's say we want the adjustments panel. well, not that one because it's over there. So let's just do materials, even though I'm not going to use materials right now. We're going to drag that out. We're going to shrink that so that we have a button, and I can create a third section if it will let me drag it. There we go. And I can put it right, and see I get that blue line. I can put it right there. Now when I want materials, I can open it and I can close it. So I would have to go back in and save it if I have made changes, but I'm hoping this will help you set up your Photoshop with what works best for you. This is Dana with Dana Digital Tutorials. Have a great day.